In 1951, I was just age 10 and had absolutely no idea about Joy Baker battling with the authorities over her freedom to educate her own children. 30 years later, our younger children benefited from the space created by her battle, because that's when we began home educating them. Now, age 70, my grandchildren enjoy that space, but I really do have to question how much longer will they be able to do so. Joy Baker was just an ordinary mother with an extraordinary attitude. She found herself unexpectedly in a long drawn-out battle, court appearances, endless letters. And, as she says in her own words in the book Children in Chancery, she said, "I had begun by assuming that as a mother of my children, I had the right to bring them up according to my own views, including the choosing of their education. And I found myself abruptly in a brave new world where education was no longer a thing of value to be prized, but a trapper's net closed inexorably over my defenceless young. It was not that I found fault with the provision of free education, but I could not accept compulsory mass education enforced by laws which made acting on individual views a criminal offence." Now, this articulate, but by no means perfect mother went on to say later, "The place for a child to be brought up and trained is in the home. Instruction is only part of education and should be given to suit the individual and not forced on the mass. The Act does not require children to receive full-time instruction, and efficient full-time education as here defined can only be given in a child's home." Joy's years of many battles were important in securing freedom for many other families in the years to come. And what she won was built on by others, and it remained unchallenged until 2009, when then Minister Ed Balls asked Graham Badman to review elective home education. His justification for doing so was a trumped-up charge of abuse. Defending herself before Durham magistrates in 1957, Joy Baker had said, "You have heard my statements and the evidence for the prosecution. I submit that these proceedings are not a matter of law, but a matter of opinion as to what suitable education for these children should consist of. No amount of argument can decide which view is right, mine or the education authorities. But I am not seeking to force my view on anyone else's children. It is the education authority who seek to force theirs on mine. Is not the whole point of this case whether under the present Act the individual parents have or have not the right to decide on the most suitable education for their own child?" Now, there's much in that we really need to see applies to today's situation, and that which Ed Balls and Graham Badman tried to overturn, that fine legal balance which had been confirmed through many things, including Joy's court appearances, where the parent has primacy in education. And they were trying to do so by an invented narrative that parents need supervision from the state. However, this move back a decade ago signalled a profound change in the ground previously used in the arguments over home education. For now, Ed Balls began a move that sought to place the state between responsible parents and their own sons and daughters. Home educators were no longer faced with prejudice, professional arrogance, and a narrow experience of life from council employees. Back then, we were faced with national politicians trying to turn public opinions against hard-working, responsible parents by simply maligning them. Hard to see at the time, but there were also signs emerging of an international desire to see every child in school, which is fundamentally different from every child being educated. Now, I'm sure Graham Badman was aware of this because in that year, he was also appointed a trustee and director of UNICEF UK. If you've not heard of them, just look in the Education Committee's evidence that they received for their recent review of home education. Because in it, UNICEF UK told them notification, approval, inspection, and regulation are the only ways for the government to satisfy itself that home educated children in England are receiving a quality education. Back in 2009, by the way, that was before smartphones and social media ended up everywhere. Home educators were motivated to fight the obvious power grab that was coming from government, and we came together to resist it. Everyone did what they could. Some collected signatures for a record-breaking set of petitions to Parliament to be presented. Others put together a powerful catalogue of positive evidence for home education. This is also where we as a family enter the political sphere for the first time. We were amongst those who travelled to London to participate in a mass lobby of Parliament. And because of the high level of engagement between home educators and politicians, we gained the support of Conservative and Liberal Democrat MPs. And that was vital, because they ensured that when the 2010 election was called, the offending clauses were removed from the bill. What I'm sad to say is at that point, when Gordon Brown lost the election and Ed Balls was no longer able to drive his agenda forward, most home educating families looked for a return to the quiet life they had previously enjoyed. However, the hostile environment against educational freedom didn't collapse. Its proponents simply retreated to regroup. They began coming out to the long grass in 2015 when Sir Michael Wilshaw, who was then the head of Ofsted, led the resurgence by linking elective home education with unregistered schools. From that platform in 2017, Lord Soley launched his bill, which in turn provided the opportunity for the Department of Education civil servants to resurrect their dormant plans. Those who today seek to impose uniform education, both in style and content, are not people that would get off lightly from Joy Baker. You see, after winning a case in 1961, she wrote, "No Act of Parliament is capable of deciding the upbringing and destiny of any child, and any act which restricts the natural right of the parent to care for the child is in breach of a higher law than that of Parliament." Or perhaps the fifth commandment should now be altered to read, Honour your father and your mother, provided they comply with the Safeguarding Act. Well, Joy in no way considered herself a churchgoer, but she did recognise that there was a higher authority than the government. Perhaps we should turn her sarcasm and bring it up to date and say that the primacy of parent now has to comply with safeguarding laws. Today, though, despite the increase in the numbers of home educating families over the last decade, I'm sad to say there appears to be less determination among us to defend the integrity of our families than there was a decade ago, when the communities were faced with the joint attack from Ed Balls and Graham Badman. I find that very concerning. Parents need to urgently realise that they cannot leave defending their freedom to home educate to other people, be they individuals or even organisations. It is imperative that every family stands up for their natural and historic responsibility as the first provider of nurture and education to their own sons and daughters. As Lady Hale said in the now famous 2016 Supreme Court ruling on the Scottish named person scheme, the first thing a totalitarian regime tries to do is to get at the children, to distance them from the subversive, varied influence of their families, and to indoctrinate them in their rulers' view of the world. Within limits, families must be left to bring up their children in their own way. I think that's exactly what Joy Baker would have said. If we're to prevent that rise of a totalitarian approach to education rising to the top in England, we desperately need more people with the tenacity that Joy Baker demonstrated. We need families like you to stand up and to be counted, not to leave it to others. My final point is anybody who's managed to read about Joy Baker will notice that her husband Peter, while she says he was supportive of her resistance to the state, was for various reasons absent from the sharp end of her 7-year battle. Now, I speak here as both a father and a grandfather of home-educated children. In that respect, today I find myself in a minority at the forefront of those standing against the imposition of state oversight on all children. The vast majority of those who are resisting the current moves to impose state control both on where and how children are taught and also on what they are taught are, I'm sad to say, mothers, not fathers. Fathers are in very short supply. Gentlemen, your children need fathers as well as mothers in this battle. Dads, granddads, please grasp the importance of this moment and raise your voices. Give your time to defend your family's freedom for the sake of your children and your grandchildren.